They say your birthday reveals who really cares about you. Well, if that's true, then I learned the most painful lesson of my life on what was supposed to be the happiest day of the year. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to build your revenge on. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly what I mean. My name is Connor, and I'm 24 years old. Well, 25 now, I guess. This story takes place exactly 6 months ago, on what should have been an incredible milestone birthday. I had planned everything perfectly, or so I thought. I'd sent out invitations 3 weeks in advance, booked my favorite restaurant's private dining room, and even created a group chat to coordinate with everyone. The theme was simple: celebrate a quarter century of life with the people who mattered most. Let me paint you a picture of my social circle, because it's important you understand just how devastating this betrayal was. There was Jake, my best friend since college. We'd been through everything together: failed exams, heartbreaks, job interviews, family drama. He was supposed to be my best man when I eventually got married. Then there was Marcus and Tyler, my gym buddies who I'd grown incredibly close to over the past 2 years. We worked out together 4 times a week, went on weekend hiking trips, and had each other's backs through thick and thin. The girls in our group were equally important to me. Sarah had been my study partner throughout university and remained one of my closest confidants. Emma was my coworker who'd become like a sister, always there with advice and a shoulder to lean on. And finally, there was Zoe, my ex-girlfriend who I'd managed to maintain a genuine friendship with after our amicable breakup 8 months prior. Yes, I know that sounds complicated, but we genuinely worked through our issues and remained close friends. These weren't just acquaintances or casual friends. These were my inner circle, my chosen family, the people I'd drop everything for if they needed me. And I had dropped everything for them, countless times. I'd driven Jake to the airport at 4 in the morning when his flight was delayed. I'd helped Marcus move apartments on my only day off that month. I'd covered Emma's shift when her grandmother was sick. I'd listened to Sarah cry for hours after her devastating breakup. I'd even helped Zoe study for her nursing boards, spending entire weekends quizzing her on medical terminology. So when I planned this birthday celebration, I wasn't just throwing a party. I was creating a moment to celebrate all of us together, to acknowledge how much these relationships meant to me. I chose a restaurant that accommodated everyone's dietary restrictions: Jake's gluten intolerance, Sarah's vegetarianism, Marcus's keto diet. I scheduled it for a Saturday evening so no one would have work conflicts. I even offered to cover the entire bill because I knew some of them were going through tight financial periods. The week leading up to my birthday, everything seemed perfect. Everyone had confirmed their attendance in our group chat. Jake had even joked about bringing a karaoke machine for after dinner. Emma suggested we go to our favorite bar afterwards for dancing. Sarah mentioned she'd gotten me something special that she couldn't wait for me to open. The excitement was building, and I found myself checking the group chat multiple times a day, grinning at the messages and planning every detail. Friday evening, the day before the party, I did a final head count and confirmation. 8 people total. My core group of 7 plus myself. I called the restaurant to confirm our reservation for 8 people at 7 p.m. I picked up the custom cake I'd ordered from the bakery downtown, decorated with an inside joke that only my friend group would understand. I even went shopping for a new outfit because I wanted to look good for the photos we'd inevitably take. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because I was genuinely excited. I kept thinking about how perfect the evening would be, how we'd laugh about this night for years to come, how these were the moments that made life worth living. I was practically vibrating with anticipation as I got ready Saturday afternoon. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, which was typical for me. I wanted to make sure everything was set up perfectly. The private dining room looked amazing. Dim lighting, elegant table settings, and they'd even put together a small "Happy Birthday Connor" banner as a complimentary touch. I sat down and checked my phone. It was 6:50 p.m., 10 minutes until everyone arrived. 7 o'clock came and went. No problem, I thought. People are always a few minutes late to these things. I ordered a drink and scrolled through social media while I waited. 7:15 p.m. Still no sign of anyone. I decided to check the group chat to see if there were any updates about traffic or delays. That's when I saw it. The group chat had been completely silent since Thursday evening. No last-minute confirmations, no running late messages, No excited pre-party chatter. Nothing. A cold feeling started creeping up my spine, but I pushed it down. Maybe everyone was just being spontaneous for once. 7:30 p.m. I called Jake. Straight to voicemail. I called Marcus. Voicemail. Tyler. Voicemail. The restaurant staff started giving me sympathetic looks, and I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I texted Sarah. Hey, where is everyone? We're supposed to start dinner soon. No response. By 8 p.m., I had to face the truth that was staring me in the face. No one was coming. Not a single person. Not my best friend who I'd trusted with my deepest secrets. Not the co-workers who'd become my chosen family. Not the friends who'd claimed they'd always have my back. No one. I sat alone in that private dining room, staring at 7 empty chairs around a table set for 8 people. The birthday cake sat in its box next to me, suddenly looking ridiculous and pathetic. The waitress approached cautiously and asked if I wanted to cancel the reservation. I nodded, unable to speak because I knew if I opened my mouth I might start crying right there in public. The drive home was a blur. I kept checking my phone, desperately hoping for a message, a missed call, anything that would explain what had happened. Maybe there was a family emergency. Maybe they'd all gotten the date wrong. Maybe there was some reasonable explanation that would make sense of this devastating abandonment. I walked into my apartment and sat on my couch in the dark, still wearing my carefully chosen birthday outfit. The silence was deafening. I stared at my phone for hours, watching as the screen remained notification-free. No happy birthday texts, no apologetic messages about emergencies, no communication whatsoever. That's when I decided to do something that would change everything. I opened Instagram, and there, at the top of my feed, was a story that made my blood run cold. It was Jake, my supposed best friend, posting from what looked like an incredibly upscale rooftop party. He was laughing, drink in hand, surrounded by people I recognized. And not just Jake. There was Marcus in the background, Tyler raising a toast, Sarah dancing with her arms in the air, Emma taking selfies, and even Zoe clinking glasses with someone off camera. They were all there, every single one of them, at someone else's party, on my birthday, while I sat alone in a restaurant waiting for people who had already made their choice. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where my detective skills kicked in. I screenshotted Jake's story and started zooming in on details. The location tag said, Penthouse Sky Lounge, one of the most expensive venues in the city. The timestamp showed 7:45 p.m., exactly when they should have been sitting down to dinner with me. And in the reflection of a wine glass in the foreground, I could make out someone's face that I didn't immediately recognize. I switched to Marcus's Instagram story. More photos from the same party, different angles. In one video, I could hear someone saying, "Thank you all so much for celebrating with me tonight," in the background. A voice I didn't recognize, but definitely female. Tyler had posted a story too, a group selfie where I could see all my friends gathered around someone whose face was partially obscured by the camera angle. This wasn't some last-minute invitation they'd stumbled into. This was planned. Coordinated. They'd all chosen to attend someone else's celebration instead of mine, and not a single one of them had the decency to tell me. They'd let me sit there, alone, on my birthday, while they partied somewhere else. I spent the next 3 hours doing what any reasonable person would do in the digital age. I conducted a full social media investigation. I cross-referenced locations, timestamps, mutual friends, and story views. I checked LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, even TikTok. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to figure out exactly what had happened. The party they'd attended was for someone named Adriana Martinez. I didn't know her personally, but I started recognizing her from the background of some of my friends' earlier posts over the past few months. She was stunning, the kind of person who looked like she belonged in magazines. And based on her social media presence, she came from serious money. Her Instagram was full of luxury travel, designer clothes, exclusive events, and influential connections. But here's what really stung. I found posts going back 6 weeks where my friends had been spending time with her. Jake at what looked like an exclusive gallery opening. Sarah and Emma at a spa day that probably cost more than I made in a week. Marcus and Tyler at some kind of VIP sporting event. Even Zoe was tagged in posts at high-end restaurants and exclusive clubs. They hadn't just abandoned me for one night. They'd been systematically building a relationship with someone else someone who could offer them experiences and access I never could. And when it came time to choose between my humble birthday dinner and her extravagant celebration, the choice was obvious to them. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. These weren't just my friends ditching me for a better party. These were people I'd trusted completely, who'd been leading double lives for weeks. They'd been sitting in our group chat, confirming their attendance at my birthday, while secretly planning to spend that exact same evening with someone else. The betrayal was complete, but my investigation was just getting started. I spent the entire Sunday digging deeper. I created a fake Instagram account and started following people who'd been at Adriana's party. Through their stories and posts, I began to understand the full scope of what had been happening behind my back. Adriana wasn't just some new friend. She was systematically collecting people from my social circle. From what I could piece together, she'd met Jake at a professional networking event about 2 months ago. Jake had introduced her to Marcus and Tyler at the gym. Sarah had met her through Jake at a work function. Emma had been invited to join them for drinks one evening. And Zoe? She'd apparently connected with Adriana through Instagram after seeing her in Jake's stories. But here's the part that really twisted the knife. I found evidence that they'd been talking about me. In one of the stories from Saturday night, I could see Sarah holding her phone, and for just a split second I could make out part of a text conversation on her screen. I screenshotted it, enhanced it, and spent hours trying to decipher the partial message I could see. What I managed to read made my blood boil. Told Connor we're coming, but obviously A's party is going to be. The rest was cut off, but I didn't need to see more. They'd explicitly discussed lying to me about attending my birthday so they could go to Adriana's party instead. This wasn't a last-minute change of plans or a scheduling conflict. This was premeditated deception. They'd looked me in the eye, confirmed their attendance at my celebration, and planned all along to abandon me for someone who could offer them a more glamorous experience. Monday morning, I woke up to a group chat explosion. Suddenly everyone was full of apologies and excuses. Jake claimed he'd had a family emergency. Marcus said he'd gotten food poisoning. Sarah insisted she'd completely mixed up the dates. Emma blamed a work crisis. Tyler said he'd been in the hospital. Zoe claimed she'd lost her phone and couldn't contact anyone. The audacity was breathtaking. Not only had they abandoned me on my birthday, but now they were lying to my face about it. They apparently assumed I was too naive or too trusting to figure out what had really happened. They thought they could feed me these transparent lies, and I'd just accept them and move on. That's when I realized something important. They didn't just think I was disposable. They thought I was stupid. And that's when I decided it was time to show them exactly how wrong they were. I spent the next 2 weeks playing the part of the understanding, forgiving friend. I responded to their apologies with messages like, "No worries, these things happen," and "I understand completely." I even suggested we reschedule the birthday celebration for the following weekend. They all eagerly agreed, probably relieved that I seemed to be buying their stories. But while I was playing the role of the naive friend, I was actually building a comprehensive case against each of them. I documented every lie, saved every screenshot, and started planning something that would expose their deception in the most poetic way possible. I discovered that Adriana was planning another exclusive event in 3 weeks. A charity gala at the most prestigious hotel in the city. Tickets were $500 each, and it was the kind of event that would be all over social media. Based on the pattern I'd observed, I was certain my friends would abandon our rescheduled birthday dinner to attend her gala instead. So I set a trap. I rescheduled my birthday celebration for the exact same night as Adriana's charity gala. Same time, same conflict. I booked a different restaurant. Still nice, but nothing compared to the luxury they'd experience at the gala. And then I waited to see what they would do. The responses were predictably creative. Jake suddenly had to work late on an important project. Marcus developed another case of food poisoning. Sarah had a family obligation come up. Emma was feeling under the weather. Tyler had car trouble. Zoe was overwhelmed with nursing school. Every single one of them once again bailed on my birthday celebration with elaborate lies. And once again I sat alone in a restaurant, but this time by choice. Because I wasn't there to celebrate. I was there to document. At exactly 7:30 p.m., I started monitoring their social media accounts. And just like clockwork, the posts began appearing. Jake in a tuxedo toasting the camera at the charity gala, Marcus and Tyler posing with some local celebrities who were in attendance, Sarah in an elegant dress, looking like she belonged at such an upscale event, Emma dancing at what was clearly an after-party, Zoe taking selfies with the glittering city skyline in the background, all of them, once again, at Adriana's event, all of them once again, lying to my face about where they were and why they couldn't attend my birthday. But this time, I was ready. I had spent the previous 2 weeks creating something special. I'd compiled every screenshot, every timestamp, every social media post that proved their deception. I'd documented both occasions where they'd chosen Adriana's events over my birthday celebrations. I'd captured their lies in the group chat and cross-referenced them with their actual locations. And then I created a presentation. Not just any presentation. A detailed, comprehensive, beautifully designed exposé that told the complete story of their betrayal. I included side-by-side comparisons of their excuses versus their actual locations. I created timelines showing how they'd been secretly building relationships with Adriana while maintaining the facade of friendship with me. I even included screenshots of their earlier posts where they'd claimed I was such an important friend to them. The presentation was 23 slides long, meticulously researched, and absolutely devastating. I titled it, The Birthday Files, a comprehensive analysis of friendship, deception, and social climbing. But I wasn't going to send it to them privately. Oh no, this required a bigger stage. I waited until the following Saturday, when I knew they'd all be relaxed and checking social media. Then I posted the entire presentation on my Instagram story, slide by slide, with the caption, "For anyone wondering why I've been a little quiet lately, here's the full story of my 25th birthday celebration and the friends who taught me some valuable lessons about loyalty." I didn't tag them. I didn't mention their names directly, but anyone who knew us would immediately recognize who I was talking about. The evidence was so comprehensive, so well documented, that there was no way they could deny or explain away their behavior. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started buzzing with messages within minutes. Not from my former friends. They were probably too busy trying to figure out how to respond, but from mutual acquaintances, colleagues, family members, and even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know more details, express their shock at the betrayal, and share their own similar experiences. But the most satisfying messages came from people who knew my former friends personally. Jake's co-workers reached out to tell me they'd always thought he seemed fake. People from Marcus and Tyler's gym mentioned they'd noticed the guys had been acting differently lately. Sarah's study group said they'd been wondering why she'd been so secretive about her weekend plans. Emma's other friends admitted they'd found her recent social media posts pretentious. Even more interesting were the messages from people who knew Adriana. Apparently, I wasn't the first person whose social circle she'd infiltrated. Multiple people reached out to warn me that she had a pattern of collecting people's friends, especially those who seemed useful or interesting to her. She would charm them away from their existing relationships, enjoy having them around while it served her purposes, and then move on to new targets. My former friends, in other words, had traded a genuine friendship for the temporary attention of someone who saw them as disposable accessories. But the real vindication came over the following weeks, as I watched their carefully constructed new social dynamic fall apart. First, Tyler reached out privately to apologize and ask if we could talk. When I didn't respond, he started posting increasingly desperate stories about missing real friendships and learning who really matters. Apparently, Adriana's crowd wasn't as welcoming to a personal trainer from a middle-class background as they'd initially seemed. Then Marcus sent a long text message explaining that he'd gotten caught up in the excitement of new experiences, but realized he'd made a huge mistake. He asked if I'd be willing to meet for coffee and work things out. When I didn't respond, he started showing up at our old gym at times when he knew I'd be there, trying to create accidental encounters. Sarah was next. She sent a handwritten letter to my apartment, explaining that she'd been dealing with insecurity issues and had been flattered by the attention from someone who seemed so successful and confident. She admitted that abandoning me on my birthday was the worst thing she'd ever done and begged for a chance to make it right. Emma tried a different approach. She started commenting supportively on all my social media posts, sharing articles about loyalty and friendship, and even sent me cookies at my office with a note that said, "I miss my friend." When that didn't work, she asked my mother for my new phone number because I'd blocked her original one. Zoe's approach was the most dramatic. She showed up at my apartment one evening crying, with a bottle of my favorite wine and a photo album of memories from our relationship and subsequent friendship. She said that getting involved with Adriana's crowd had made her realize how much she valued our genuine connection. And Jake? Jake tried to pretend nothing had happened for about a week, until mutual friends started asking him about the situation. Then he attempted to spin his own version of events on social media, claiming there had been misunderstandings, and that social media doesn't tell the whole story. When that backfired spectacularly, he tried the direct approach, showing up at my office to demand I take down the presentation because it was ruining his reputation. But here's the beautiful part. I didn't have to do anything to destroy their new social group. It self-destructed naturally. Adriana, as it turned out, had already moved on to more interesting targets. My former friends found themselves suddenly uninvited to the exclusive events they'd become accustomed to. The luxury experiences dried up. The VIP access disappeared. They'd burned their bridge with me to gain entry to a world that was already losing interest in them. Within 2 months, they were posting about getting back to basics and appreciating simple pleasures. Translation: they could no longer afford or access the lifestyle they'd abandoned me for, and now they had neither their old friend nor their new social status. Jake ended up having to find a new gym because the awkwardness with Marcus and Tyler became unbearable when they realized they'd all been competing for Adriana's attention. Sarah and Emma had a falling out over something that happened at one of the exclusive events, and they stopped speaking to each other entirely. Zoe started dating someone from Adriana's former circle, only to discover he was simultaneously seeing 2 other women from the same group. The whole thing imploded spectacularly, and I watched it happen from a safe distance while rebuilding my social life with people who actually valued authenticity over access. But the story doesn't end with their social downfall. It ends with something much better: my own personal growth and the incredible friendships I built in the aftermath. About a month after posting my presentation, I was approached by someone I'd never met before. Her name was Riley, and she'd seen my story through a mutual connection. She'd gone through a similar betrayal with her own friend group the previous year, and she wanted to know if I'd be interested in joining a group she'd started for people who'd experienced friendship betrayals. What started as a support group turned into some of the most genuine friendships I'd ever experienced. These were people who understood the pain of being abandoned, who valued loyalty because they knew what it felt like to have it absent, and who had no interest in superficial social climbing. Through Riley's group, I met David, a teacher who'd been excluded from his college friend group when they started making more money and didn't want to slow down their lifestyle for his budget. I met Jessica, a nurse who'd discovered her bridesmaids had been planning to skip her wedding for a music festival. I met Antonio, a social worker who'd been dropped by his friends when they decided his job was too depressing to hear about. These people became my new inner circle, and the friendships we built were deeper and more meaningful than anything I'd experienced before. We celebrated each other's successes without jealousy, supported each other through difficulties without judgment, and showed up for each other consistently because we all knew what it felt like when people didn't. 6 months later, I threw myself another birthday party. This time, it was at David's house with a homemade cake that Jessica baked, music that Antonio curated, and decorations that Riley had spent hours crafting. It wasn't fancy or Instagram-worthy, but it was filled with people who were genuinely happy to celebrate me. And the best part? Every single person showed up. As I sat in David's backyard, surrounded by friends who'd chosen to be there not because of what I could offer them, but because they genuinely cared about me, I realized something important. My 25th birthday hadn't been ruined by the people who didn't show up. It had been the beginning of a new chapter with people who always would. The presentation I'd created to expose my former friend's betrayal had done more than just reveal their true nature. It had attracted people who appreciated honesty, loyalty, and authenticity. It had filtering out the social climbers and brought in the genuine connections. My former friends had taught me an invaluable lesson, just not the one they'd intended. They'd shown me that some people see relationships as transactions, opportunities to upgrade their social status or gain access to better experiences. But they'd also shown me how rare and precious it is to find people who see friendship as something intrinsic, something valuable in and of itself. Jake never did rebuild his reputation fully. Word had spread about his pattern of abandoning friends for better opportunities, and people became wary of trusting him. Marcus and Tyler started training at separate gyms and barely acknowledged each other when they crossed paths. Sarah graduated, but struggled to maintain friendships because people had heard about her tendency to disappear when something more attractive came along. Emma found that her networking efforts were hampered by her reputation for being unreliable. Zoe's nursing school classmates kept their distance after learning about her history of dropping commitments. As for Adriana, I never met her personally, but through mutual connections I learned that she'd moved on to infiltrating a completely different social circle across town. The pattern continued: charm offensive, gradual isolation of targets from their existing relationships, exclusive events and experiences, then inevitable abandonment when more interesting people came along. My former friends had been both her victims and her accomplices, and in the end, they'd lost everything they'd tried to gain. But I'd gained something infinitely more valuable. I'd learned to recognize the difference between people who want to be in your life and people who want what your life can do for them. I'd developed the confidence to cut ties with those who didn't value me, and the wisdom to invest deeply in those who did. The presentation I'd created had been viewed by over 3,000 people before I finally deleted it 6 months later. Not because I regretted it, but because I no longer needed the validation of exposing their betrayal. I'd moved on to something better. And that, ultimately, was the perfect revenge. Not just exposing their deception, but building something so much better than what I'd lost, that their betrayal became a gift rather than a wound. Sometimes the best way to get back at people who underestimate you is to become someone they could never have imagined. Sometimes the perfect revenge is just living well enough that you realize you're grateful they showed you who they really were before it was too late to find something better. My 25th birthday taught me that birthdays don't reveal who cares about you. They reveal who's worth caring about. And sometimes the people who don't show up are doing you the biggest favor of all. They're showing you exactly where not to invest your heart. So to anyone who's ever sat alone at their own birthday celebration, wondering what they did wrong or why they weren't enough, you didn't do anything wrong. And you are absolutely enough. The right people will show up, and when they do, you'll understand why it was so important that the wrong ones didn't. Trust me, the birthday party with people who choose to be there is infinitely better than the one where people feel obligated to attend. And the friends who show up during your worst moments are infinitely more valuable than those who only appear for your best ones. If you enjoyed this revenge story, smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss when I upload new content.